Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Jonathan Long with the Reston Church of Christ. We're just glad that you clicked on our video. Decided to watch it with us. Today we're going to talk about giving and especially how Jesus gave. The other evening, Jade and I went to dinner. Jade's my wife, and we went to dinner and we went and tried a new place in town. We heard it was a little bit nicer than just your run-of-the-mill box chain stores, and so we wanted to try it. And we went and we sat down and we realized rather quickly that it was a little bit nicer than what we were used to. And after we ate an appetizer and we ate our two dinners, we went ahead and skipped on the dessert. We got a bill that was nearly $100. And that may not be much for you, but for us that's a pretty large bill. And then they've got that pesky line down there, gratuity, the fancy word for for a tip. And I was looking there. This was one of those restaurants that doesn't start it at 15%. It suggests 18, 22, or 18, 20, or 22%, are the suggestions that it made. It says or more, and sitting there for a moment, I started to struggle and go, oh no, if I give them 18%, is that too little of a tip? 18% on $100, that's $18. She only refilled one drink and brought us two plates. We were only here for 30 minutes. How much money is this young lady going to make? And we kind of struggle with, how much do I give her? I've been in other situations, and I'm sure you have too, where you have terrible service. And you go, well, what am I going to give this person? After a performance like that, do they deserve 15%, which is supposed to be standard? Should I give them 10%? Should I give them anything at all? One time we went to Nicaragua on a mission trip, and they had coffee, and they said they were take as much coffee as you'd like for donations. I wasn't sure what in the world to give. And I took the bags of coffee, and I was just really, really struggling with how much I was going to put in there. I didn't want to seem like a cheapskate. I didn't want to give more than what they would be expecting. And I started funneling out some cash out of my wallet, and one of the couples that was leading us on this trip had been there dozens of times. They said, that's plenty, and I took a breath of relief, but instantly I had that thought of, oh, was that too much? Should I just give them a little less then? And we get caught in this idea of this tension of, I don't want to give somebody too much. What if I pay too much for something? What if I give too much of myself? We also don't want the other one. We don't want to give too little to the people that we love and care about. And so when we look at giving, we're going to look at that. There was no man that gave like Jesus, and we're going to try to draw an application from that. First thing that's important for us to recognize is that Jesus gave up his home. Jesus created the universe. He was the word that was spoken in Genesis chapter 1 that formed the universe. He sits on a throne in heaven. And he has all the glory of the angels worshiping him constantly. And that Jesus gave that up. And he gave that up to come to earth, to a place where John 7 says that at the end of a day, in verse 53, they each went to their own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. It was because he had nowhere to go. In chapter 6 and verse 38 of John, Jesus said, I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but to do the will of him who sent me. In other places it says that birds of the air have nests and foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus was willing to give up all of that to come to earth and have nothing. He gave up an eternal home, a kingdom home, to come to earth and to walk around like a stranger. John chapter 14, he's trying to encourage his disciples. He's just told them that he's going to leave them. And he says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again to receive you into myself, that where I am, there you will be also. And he makes that promise. He came to this earth and had no home, so that he could reconcile us to him and to his Father, and so that we could come and be at home with him. What a beautiful picture. Jesus, no man gave like Jesus. We struggle about what we're going to give, how much. Jesus gave a home in heaven. We could give up a little bit more of our time that we spend in comfort in our home, maybe for him. We also see that Jesus gave up his childhood. We are familiar with that story, or often you hear the story, Jesus going to the temple when he's a young boy. He goes to Jerusalem with his family, and he spends time at the temple answering questions and asking questions of the teachers that are there, and they're astonished. Jesus was a young boy. He could have been playing with the other boys. He could have been at the shop shopping. He could have been seeing the sights. Instead, Jesus was at the temple trying to draw closer to God. That relationship obviously continued in that way, because in John chapter 7 and verse 5, Jesus is presented as a teacher, and his brothers don't believe him. His brothers hate him. They actually try to taunt him into exposing himself so that the chief priests and the Pharisees would see him and would possibly get him killed. That's how much his brothers didn't like him. Jesus gave up a childhood where he could have a relationship with his brothers, where he could have a relationship with his family. He gave that up in dedication to God. For parents, this is a hard lesson, because we give our kids up sometimes. We give our kids to the world instead of giving them to the Father. We spend so much time on their education and in sports training and whatever else that it is that we forget that our children are going to grow up one day, and they're going to make decisions about where to steer their entire life. And if we've been training them for 12, 13, 18 years to be worldly, they're not going to wake up one day and choose to be godly. We should sacrifice some bit of our children's childhood so that they could learn to draw closer to God. We'd be setting them up for a much brighter, joyful, fulfilled life if we do that. Third thing is that Jesus gave up his time. In Matthew chapter 14, Jesus had been healing and doing all kinds of things, and someone comes up to him, tells him that John the Baptist has died. He's been beheaded by Herod. And it says that Jesus withdrew. He got in a boat and he withdrew from the crowds, and he wanted to mourn. But the crowd saw him trying to leave, and they ran around to where he was going. They beat him there. They wouldn't let him have his time to mourn and his time alone. Jesus didn't rebuke them. Jesus didn't yell at them and tell them, you know what? I deserve a little bit of time. Instead, Jesus looked at them, and he gave them his time. He healed. He taught. He got among the people. I can't imagine what that's like to have a relationship with probably the closest person to Jesus besides those three apostles. The one that was most like Jesus, his cousin. And hear that he died and that he can't even get away to mourn him. He gave up that time of mourning for those people. Jesus gives his time. You and I could learn something from that. Even in difficult situations, we can still be giving of our time. And then the last thing that we see, Jesus gave up his life. In Galatians 1:4, Paul describes what he was giving up when he did that. It says that he gave himself for our sins to deliver us from the present evil age according to the will of our God and Father. And it says in Romans 5:6 that he did that while we were still weak and ungodly. And then he compared it. He said, humans would barely die for a good person, but Jesus, while we were still sinners, died for us. Jesus gave his life. He suffered some lashings, some beatings. He suffered immensely for you and I. He gave up his life at 33 years old so that you and I could live eternally. When we start thinking about things that only take, there's leeches, there's ticks, there's fleas, there's vampires, and if we're honest, there's a lot of Christians that only take. They show up to a worship service and they just, what can I get? What can I get? Feed me, feed me, feed me. They show up to an event and they just, they take and they take and they enjoy, but they're not ever working that same thing. They look at a starving world. Instead, they turn to a preacher because they're starving for knowledge. We ought not be flea-like Christians. We don't want to be takers only. We should be those that also give, recognizing that every good gift and every perfect gift comes from God above. He's given these things into our hands so that we can use them as a blessing to show people the nature and character of God dwelling in us. What a world we would live in if every Christian had the spirit of giving like Christ. There was no man like him. He gave everything for you so that you could live. I hope this was useful to you. I hope it makes you reflect and want to be more like God in that way. we're so thankful for you joining with us. If you'd like to share or subscribe our video, we'd appreciate it. Mostly, we would love if you would come and visit us and to let us know that these are helping you, that this is helping you in your walk with Christ. We love you. Until the next time, we'll see you then.